Most people lose power in the moment they try to use it. They speak too quickly. They defend too soon. They explain too much. They react too emotionally. They chase resolution before tension has finished speaking. And in doing so, they interfere with something deeper that was already working in their favor. There is a dangerous power in doing nothing. Not laziness, not avoidance, not weakness, stillness. The kind of stillness that makes the other person uncomfortable. The kind that forces truth to surface. The kind that removes your emotional fingerprints from the outcome. Watch what happens when you stop defending yourself in an argument. Watch what happens when you don't respond to subtle disrespect immediately. Watch what happens when you don't chase after someone who withdraws. Watch what happens when you stop correcting how others perceive you. At first, it feels like loss. Silence feels like surrender. Inaction feels like defeat. But then something shifts. People reveal more than they intended. Manipulators overplay their hand. Insecure individuals lean forward. False connections collapse. Real ones intensify. Because most people rely on your reaction to sustain their position. When you remove your reaction, the dynamic destabilizes. And when a dynamic destabilizes, truth reorganizes itself. This is what Jung meant when he spoke about individuation, the withdrawal of projection, the integration of shadow, the refusal to interfere with your own psychological unfolding. The ego wants to fix everything immediately. The ego wants to control perception. The ego wants to win the moment. But the deeper self understands something else. Silence exposes. Stillness recalibrates. Non-interference forces alignment. The dangerous power of doing nothing is not about giving up control. It is about stepping back far enough to see who truly moves toward you and who only moved when you were pushing. By the end of this video, you will understand why your greatest leverage is not force, it is restraint. And why sometimes the most powerful move you can make is no move at all. If you value psychological depth over noise, subscribe to Quiet Power. Here, we don't teach dominance through aggression. We teach dominance through internal control. And what you're about to learn will change how you handle conflict, attraction, manipulation, and yourself. The ego is impatient. It wants clarity now. It wants resolution now. It wants validation now. When tension appears, it rushes to fill the gap. When silence stretches, it scrambles to break it. When perception feels threatened, it overcorrects. This constant interference creates distortion. Imagine water settling in a glass. If you keep stirring it, the sediment never falls. The surface remains cloudy. But if you leave it untouched, gravity does the work. Particles sink. Clarity forms naturally. Human dynamics function the same way. Every time you rush to defend yourself, you stir the water. Every time you over-explain your intentions, you stir it again. Every time you react emotionally to someone's behavior, you inject more movement into something that might have revealed its truth on its own. Ego interference is not strength. It is fear disguised as action. Fear of being misunderstood. Fear of being abandoned. Fear of losing position. Fear of not being chosen. And fear produces urgency. Urgency leaks power. When someone senses urgency in you, they feel leverage. Not because they are malicious, but because urgency signals that the outcome matters more to you than your internal stability does. Internal stability is the foundation of quiet power. Without it, every interaction becomes negotiation. You negotiate for reassurance. You negotiate for status. You negotiate for clarity. You negotiate for validation. And negotiation creates imbalance. The dangerous power of doing nothing begins when you withdraw from unnecessary negotiation. If someone questions you unfairly, and you do not immediately defend yourself, you create space. In that space, their tone becomes more visible. Their intention becomes clearer. If they were testing you, the test loses traction. If they were projecting, the projection echoes louder. Projection requires resistance to survive. When you stop resisting, projection collapses. Carl Jung spoke extensively about projection, the way individuals unconsciously cast their unresolved aspects onto others. When someone accuses you of something disproportionate, they are often revealing more about themselves than about you. But if you react defensively, you confirm the narrative. Silence, when grounded, exposes narrative weaknesses. This does not mean you never speak. It means you choose timing deliberately. It means you allow patterns to reveal themselves before you intervene. Intervention too early interrupts revelation. Most people sabotage their own clarity by intervening too soon. They call out red flags immediately. They chase after mixed signals. They attempt to fix misunderstanding before observing whether misunderstanding was intentional. Doing nothing in these moments is not passivity. It is observation. Observation creates information. Information creates power. When you stop reacting instantly, you begin noticing patterns that were previously blurred by emotion. You see who escalates when ignored. You see who softens when you remain calm. You see who respects your boundaries without explanation. You see who disappears when not pursued. Those observations are alignment. Alignment is not mystical coincidence. It is the removal of distortion. When ego interference decreases, your perception sharpens. You are no longer clouded by the need to win the moment. You are no longer chasing short-term emotional relief. You are watching, and watching changes your posture. Your voice lowers slightly. Your breathing steadies. Your responses shorten. You begin answering only what is asked, instead of overloading the conversation with reassurance. That containment unsettles people who rely on emotional movement, because emotional movement is easy to manipulate. Stillness is not. When you remain still during conflict, the other person must confront their own escalation. When you do not immediately chase someone who withdraws, they must confront whether their withdrawal was strategic or authentic. When you stop correcting perception, people must decide whether their misunderstanding was worth losing access to you. Doing nothing forces others to act without your influence, and their action, free from your interference, reveals their character. Character revelation is alignment. You cannot align with reality if you constantly distort it with ego defense. So the first layer of the dangerous power of doing nothing is this. You remove your fingerprints from the outcome. You stop forcing connection. You stop forcing resolution. You stop forcing perception. And in that absence of force, truth reorganizes itself. Most people believe power comes from action, from speaking first, from reacting fast, from correcting instantly, from asserting control before control is questioned. But movement hides information. Stillness reveals it. When you react quickly, you interrupt the natural unfolding of behavior. You respond to tone before tone completes itself. You defend against accusations before they fully form. You rush to fix tension before tension has exposed its source. And in doing so, you protect others from revealing who they truly are. Speed protects deception. Stillness exposes it. Imagine someone subtly testing your boundaries. A slight disrespect. A sarcastic remark disguised as humor. A delayed response designed to see if you'll chase. If you immediately confront, defend, or compensate, the test ends prematurely. They gather data about your sensitivity. They adjust accordingly. The dynamic continues hidden beneath politeness. But if you do nothing, not coldly, not resentfully, but calmly, the test stretches. And when a test stretches without reaction, it intensifies. They push slightly further. Their pattern becomes clearer. What was once subtle becomes visible. People reveal themselves when they think you are not paying attention. Stillness makes them think you are unbothered. And when they believe you are unbothered, they show more. This is the second layer of power in doing nothing. Behavioral exposure. Manipulation requires feedback. It requires visible impact. If someone attempts to influence your mood and sees immediate change, they feel effective. Effectiveness reinforces behavior. They continue. But if they attempt to influence you and see no visible shift, no irritation, no anxiety, no urgency, their strategy weakens. Some escalate, some retreat, some recalibrate. All three responses give you information. Information is leverage. The person who gathers information without revealing their internal state holds structural advantage in any interaction. Stillness does exactly that. It withholds unnecessary data. Most people leak data constantly, through tone shifts, through rapid replies, through emotional overcorrection, through subtle facial microexpressions that betray insecurity. Data leakage invites manipulation. Contained presence prevents it. When you begin practicing non-interference, something else happens internally. Your nervous system slows down. Instead of reacting from reflex, you begin observing from distance. That distance changes your perception of events. Small provocations feel smaller. Delays feel less threatening. Silence feels less heavy. You begin to see that many things you once reacted to were not emergencies. They were ego triggers. The ego interprets ambiguity as danger. It wants immediate clarification. It wants reassurance. It wants to restore stability instantly. But true stability does not require instant restoration. It tolerates uncertainty. When you tolerate uncertainty, you break the emotional rhythm that most dynamics depend on. If someone expects you to react within minutes, and you respond hours later, calmly, without apology, their expectation fractures. They must adjust. Adjustment creates awareness. Awareness shifts hierarchy. Hierarchy is rarely spoken about openly in relationships, friendships, or workplaces. But it exists everywhere. Who needs approval more? Who fears loss more? Who reacts faster? Who over-explains? The one who fears loss most usually moves most. Movement signals vulnerability. Stillness signals optionality. Optionality increases perceived value. This is why silence can feel powerful, but only when it is not weaponized. Weaponized silence feels hostile. Grounded silence feels neutral. Neutrality is destabilizing in emotionally charged environments. If someone attempts to provoke and you remain neutral, their emotional intensity appears disproportionate. The contrast exposes imbalance. Others notice. Even they notice. Contrast magnifies behavior. By doing nothing, you create contrast. By speaking less, you amplify their words. By reacting less, you magnify their reaction. By withdrawing force, you highlight force in others. This exposure often accelerates alignment. People who thrive on drama drift away. People who respect calm lean closer. People who rely on control become unsettled. People who value equality stabilize. Alignment is simply the sorting process of energy, and doing nothing speeds up sorting. Not because you are passive, but because you stop interfering with the filtration system. There is another layer beneath this. When you stop intervening prematurely, you allow discomfort to mature. Discomfort is information. If someone feels uneasy when you don't react, that unease belongs to them. If someone feels anxious when you don't chase, that anxiety belongs to them. Previously, you may have rushed to soothe it. You may have filled silence with reassurance. You may have overcorrected your tone to restore harmony. But harmony that requires self-abandonment is distortion. True harmony does not demand that you move first every time. When you remain still, you give others the opportunity to show initiative. If they value connection, they will lean forward. If they were only responding to your pursuit, they will fade. Both outcomes clarify reality. Clarity is alignment. And alignment cannot occur when you constantly rescue dynamics from natural consequence. Doing nothing removes the rescue instinct. It allows consequences to unfold. Consequences reveal intention. Intention reveals character. Character determines direction. This is why stillness feels dangerous, because it removes your illusion of control and replaces it with observation. You cannot micromanage perception while observing. You cannot chase and watch simultaneously. Observation requires restraint. Restraint feels uncomfortable at first. It feels like surrender. But over time, restraint becomes strength. You realize that many outcomes improve when you stop interfering. Arguments de-escalate when you refuse escalation. Manipulation fails when you refuse reaction. Attraction deepens when you refuse desperation. Movement once felt powerful. Now you see that timing is power. And sometimes the most precise timing is no timing at all. There is a moment in every dynamic where power quietly shifts. It does not announce itself. It does not create noise. It does not require confrontation. It happens the instant you stop needing the outcome. Before that moment, everything you do is slightly contaminated by attachment. You want the apology. You want the reply. You want the respect. You want the reassurance. Even if you pretend not to, the wanting shapes your posture. Attachment tightens energy. Tight energy moves quickly, and quick movement reveals priority. The one who moves first, explains first, fixes first, chases first, signals that the outcome holds weight over their internal balance. But when you remove that weight, something extraordinary happens. The psychological center of gravity shifts. Doing nothing becomes dangerous because it removes visible attachment. And when attachment disappears, predictability disappears with it. Predictability is comfort. Unpredictability demands attention. If someone is used to you responding immediately, and you don't, their nervous system registers change. If they are used to you defending yourself, and you remain composed, they feel imbalance. If they expect pursuit, and you offer space instead, they confront uncertainty. Uncertainty activates focus. Focus intensifies perception. Perception creates emotional involvement. The paradox is simple. The less you try to control the narrative, the more others think about it. When you stop over-clarifying your intentions, they begin interpreting. When you stop chasing reconciliation, they begin questioning distance. When you stop feeding energy into tension, they begin feeling it alone. Alone, tension becomes louder. Together, tension diffuses. This is the reversal. Previously, you may have carried the emotional weight of interactions. You monitored tone. You softened edges. You prevented silence from stretching too long. You kept conversations alive. Now you withdraw that effort, and the emotional weight redistributes. They feel it. They notice the gap you once filled. And in that gap, awareness grows. Awareness leads to recalibration. Recalibration leads to pursuit, not always romantic, but energetic. They initiate more. They explain more. They attempt to regain equilibrium. Why? Because humans instinctively seek balance in relational exchanges. When one side withdraws force, the other compensates. This is not manipulation. It is structural physics of psychology. If you push a door constantly, the hinge resists. If you suddenly release pressure, the hinge swings freely. The resistance was never the door's natural state. It was reaction to force. Many relationships operate this way. Force creates counterforce. Withdrawal removes opposition. And without opposition, true intention surfaces. If someone only engaged because you were pushing, they stop. If someone valued the connection, they step forward. Doing nothing reveals who moves voluntarily. Voluntary movement is the purest form of alignment. There is also an ego component here that most ignore. Ego thrives on impact. It wants to feel influential. When someone believes they can trigger you to silence, flirtation, sarcasm, withdrawal, they feel position. Position reinforces identity. But when their behavior produces no visible shift in you, the ego feels destabilized. Destabilization invites adjustment. Adjustment sometimes looks like increased effort, sometimes like sudden warmth, sometimes like vulnerability. The ego attempts to re-establish relevance. Your stillness makes that process visible. If you react too soon, you interrupt the adjustment. You soothe insecurity before it matures into self-awareness. You restore comfort before discomfort teaches anything. Discomfort teaches more than reassurance ever could. By doing nothing, you allow others to experience the consequences of their behavior without interference. Consequences are mirrors. Mirrors create growth or retreat. Either way, clarity increases. But there is a deeper layer to this reversal. When you stop chasing outcomes, your internal world stabilizes. Your self-worth detaches from reaction cycles. You no longer experience emotional spikes based on external validation. That stability radiates subtly. It shows in slower speech, in steadier breathing, in controlled facial expressions, in relaxed posture. These microsignals communicate confidence more effectively than any words. Humans are highly attuned to microsignals. We detect emotional regulation unconsciously. When someone remains composed in situations that typically provoke anxiety, we interpret it as strength. Strength shifts perception. Perception shifts hierarchy. Hierarchy shifts behavior. Suddenly, the person who once held emotional leverage feels uncertain. They can no longer predict you. They can no longer move you easily. The dynamic equalizes, sometimes even reverses. And here lies the dangerous edge. When power shifts, temptation appears. You may feel the urge to test it, to withhold deliberately, to weaponize silence, to create artificial tension. That is ego returning in disguise. True quiet power does not manipulate. It remains steady. If someone leans forward, you do not gloat. If someone increases effort, you do not overindulge. If someone reveals insecurity, you do not exploit it. You remain grounded, because the real objective was never control. It was freedom from reactivity. Freedom from reactivity is the highest form of leverage. When you cannot be easily provoked, influenced, or rushed, you operate from choice, not impulse. Choice is power. Impulse is vulnerability. Doing nothing trains you to tolerate impulse without acting on it. You feel the urge to reply immediately. You wait. You feel the urge to defend. You observe. You feel the urge to chase. You breathe. In that pause, identity restructures. You are no longer the person who moves first out of fear. You become the person who moves deliberately out of clarity. And clarity changes everything. Because when you act from clarity, your movements are fewer, but heavier. And heavy movements shift reality more than frantic ones ever could. At first, doing nothing feels unnatural. You feel the urge to fix, to clarify, to defend, to chase, to restore equilibrium manually. The ego hates unfinished tension. It hates silence without resolution. It hates ambiguity without explanation. So when you choose stillness, it interprets it as danger. But what you are really doing is something far more precise. You are allowing reality to breathe without your distortion. Most misalignment in life does not come from fate. It comes from interference. We interrupt endings that were trying to complete themselves. We revive conversations that were meant to die. We pursue connections that were naturally fading. We explain ourselves to people who already decided not to understand. Interference creates artificial continuity, and artificial continuity delays truth. The dangerous power of doing nothing is that it accelerates truth. When you stop forcing responses, silence reveals interest. When you stop correcting perception, misunderstanding reveals intention. When you stop chasing reassurance, inconsistency reveals commitment level. Reality becomes louder when you stop drowning it with effort. This is where many misunderstand the concept. Doing nothing is not laziness. It is disciplined restraint. It is the refusal to engage from insecurity. It is the ability to sit inside uncertainty without reaching for control. Control is seductive. It gives the illusion of safety. But forced control often produces fragile outcomes. You can pressure someone into replying. You can argue someone into apologizing. You can insist someone into staying. But none of those outcomes are aligned. They are coerced. Alignment only exists when movement is voluntary. When someone moves toward you without pressure, that is alignment. When someone respects you without repeated explanation, that is alignment. When someone clarifies misunderstanding without you begging for clarity, that is alignment. Doing nothing filters out what required force to survive. Force-free dynamics are sustainable. Force-dependent dynamics collapse. This is why stillness feels dangerous, because it risks loss. When you stop intervening, you may lose people. You may lose conversations. You may lose temporary validation. But what remains is stronger, because what remains did not require persuasion. And when something does not require persuasion, it holds weight. There is also a psychological purification that happens internally. When you constantly act to control outcomes, you stay externally focused. Your awareness is consumed by other people's behavior. You track tone. You analyze delays. You decode subtext. You strategize responses. But when you step back, attention turns inward. You begin noticing your own triggers. Why did that silence bother me? Why did that delay create anxiety? Why did that tone make me defensive? Doing nothing externally creates awareness internally. And awareness is the beginning of individuation, the integration of the self without projection. Carl Jung described individuation as the process of becoming whole by withdrawing unconscious projections and facing the shadow. When you stop reacting to every external stimulus, you are forced to confront what inside you demanded that reaction. Stillness exposes not only others, but you. And that is where real power forms. Because once you understand your triggers, they lose influence. Once you see your need for validation, it weakens. Once you recognize your fear of abandonment, it stops controlling your timing. Internal alignment precedes external alignment. When your inner world stabilizes, your outer world reorganizes naturally. Not magically, not mystically, logically. You stop engaging in arguments that drain you. You stop chasing dynamics that require constant proof. You stop explaining yourself where respect is absent. You stop negotiating your value. And suddenly, your energy consolidates. Consolidated energy feels heavier. Heavier energy feels rarer. Rarity increases value. Value attracts. But here is the final truth. The goal is not to make everything align around you. The goal is to align with yourself so completely that misaligned things fall away without resistance. Doing nothing allows misalignment to reveal itself. It speeds up sorting. Some people will step forward. Some will step back. Let them. Your restraint is not a strategy to win them. It is a strategy to remain intact. Because when you remain intact, you cannot be destabilized by temporary shifts. You are no longer reacting to preserve image. You are responding from identity. Identity that is grounded does not require constant defense. It does not tremble under silence. It does not rush to correct perception. It trusts exposure. It trusts time. It trusts that what is real does not collapse under stillness. The dangerous power of doing nothing is this. You stop trying to control the current, and you discover who is only swimming because you are pushing the water. When you remove effort, effort from others becomes visible. When you remove pressure, voluntary movement becomes clear. When you remove noise, truth becomes loud. And truth, once seen, reorganizes your life faster than force ever could. Stillness is not surrender. It is filtration. And once you understand that, you stop fearing silence. You start using it. If this shifted something inside you, don't rush past it. Pause. That pause you just felt, that's the beginning of control. Subscribe to Quiet Power if you're done reacting and ready to operate differently. And in the comments, answer this honestly. Where in your life do you need to stop interfering? One word: relationship, career, family, self. Let's see where alignment begins.